Kelly Freezy life followed a well-planned path raised by parents who valued financial security. He focused on saving, investing, and living within his means, rather than pursuing a flashy lifestyle. Before meeting Megan Flowers, Kelly's life was predictable, centered on his property management career. Megan's lively personality balanced his reserved nature, and they made a strong couple. However, differences in values, especially regarding lifestyle, began to surface. Kelly prioritized financial stability, while Megan leaned towards socializing and appearances. Despite these differences, they managed to coexist until a pivotal moment. Kelly believed in the superstition that events came in threes, and on a Friday afternoon the first bad thing happened. Working for a property management group in Missouri, Kelly had always been frugal, saving his commissions while others spent lavishly. His boss, Jerry Myers, frequently criticized Kelly's modest lifestyle, urging him to keep up with his colleagues during a tough economic period. Jerry called each team member into his office. When it was Kelly's turn, Jerry bluntly informed him that layoffs were necessary. Despite Kelly's success, Jerry argued that his savings made him a better candidate for a layoff compared to his less financially secure co-workers. Kelly was stunned, questioning the logic of punishing him for his financial responsibility. Jerry, visibly stressed, defended his decision, criticizing Kelly's appearance and lifestyle for not aligning with the company's image. In the end, Jerry dismissed Kelly, asking him to clean out his desk. Kelly stood as tall as his 5'9" frame allowed. His parents had always emphasized the importance of savings, and now it was paying off with 8 years of savings and investment dividends. He had nearly $3 million in reserves. Unlike his coworkers, who had little saved, Kelly didn't need to work if he chose not to, but he enjoyed the hunt for properties. He left without saying goodbye to Jerry and began clearing out his cubicle, which held few personal items. The company owned the computer, but Kelly smiled as he transferred his latest proposal to his personal drive and deleted it from the system. Jerry had no idea the shipping company that had contacted Kelly directly would now be his own opportunity. Kelly didn't erase other work. He wasn't vindictive as he left. His coworkers didn't acknowledge him, which didn't surprise him. He had always been the outsider. He wished them well but doubted the company would survive the ongoing economic downturn. Loading his belongings into his old pickup, he headed home to discuss the future with Megan. He wanted to avoid touching their savings if possible. On the drive, Kelly weighed the pros and cons. Their mortgage was low thanks to buying when interest rates were near historic lows. He could cut his YMCA membership and jog instead, and a cheap set of weights would handle the rest of his workouts. He already did the yard work, and he had resisted Megan's desire for a backyard pond to keep costs down. Kelly also did most of the grocery shopping and housework, letting Mihan focus on her career. He believed in sharing responsibilities, something Megan appreciated. She had a stable job at a printing company with little risk of layoff. They hadn't started a family yet, so their insurance needs were minimal. Kelly even considered this might be a good time for them to have a baby. Now that he had more time at home, their vehicles were paid off, needing only maintenance. His truck was old but in good shape, and Megan's car just paid off, had low maintenance costs. If needed, he could be added to Megan's insurance. In fact, this downturn might be the push he needed to go freelance. As he pulled into the driveway, Kelly smiled, but his mood shifted when he saw a car blocking his garage spot. It was Mary and Mark Brooks' newer car Mary must be visiting. Kelly decided to delay telling Megan about losing his job. He grabbed his box of belongings and entered the house. It was early spring, cool and overcast, so he didn't expect to find them on the back patio. But when he didn't see them in the living room or kitchen, he grew concerned. He set the box on the table and headed upstairs. At the top of the stairs he heard soft moans. Kelly trusted Megan completely and never doubted her fidelity, but as he approached their bedroom, the truth hit him. Bad thing number 2 awaited him, unfolding in their own bed. As he stood there, memories of meeting Megan at a party years ago flooded his mind. Her blonde hair, blue eyes, and vibrant personality had captivated him. They had been in their mid-20s and everything seemed perfect. Now his world was unraveling. Kelly and Megan took their time getting to know each other before they became physically engaged, though they did engage in heavy kissing and petting. When they finally consummated their relationship, it felt like true lovemaking, fueled by their deep connection. They had never regretted it until today. Now Kelly stood in shock as he saw his former friend Mark Brooks in bed with Mihan. They had talked about fantasies before, but Kelly never imagined they would act on them. He had always believed Megan was enough for him, but clearly she felt differently. Kelly froze at the sight until Mary, also in bed, noticed him and smiled, casually inviting him closer. Megan greeted him as if nothing was wrong, saying they were glad he arrived in time to join them. Mark, unfazed, got off the bed while Megan covered in hickeys and bite. Marks urged Kelly to join them, explaining they had started without him but wanted him to be part of it. Confused, Kelly couldn't process what was happening. He had never shown interest in swinging or anything beyond their relationship. As they approached, Kelly backed away, overwhelmed by the shock of losing his job and finding his wife in this situation. Megan kept talking, excited about the idea of them all being together, but Kelly could barely comprehend her words. He managed to stutter that he needed to get something and pulled away from her grasp. Megan, sensing something was wrong, hesitated but didn't fully understand his distress. Kelly quickly left the room, never promising to return. He went downstairs, grabbed his essentials tablet, laptop, charger's phone, and headed to his truck, sitting in the driver's seat. He knew starting the engine meant leaving this chapter of his life behind. After a brief pause, he turned the key and backed out of the driveway, ignoring Megan as she ran out in her robe trying to stop him. He drove away without looking back, realizing he needed time to figure out his next steps. Kelly drove aimlessly for a while before heading out of the city. Reflecting on his relationship with Megan, he had always believed she was the one for him, the woman he wanted to marry and start a family with. They had shared so much, and she had never seemed unhappy with their life together. Until now. Kelly couldn't recall any signs or behavior that might have hinted at Megan's actions. He drove on autopilot for hours, heading west into Kansas. He only stopped when his low fuel light came on, realizing he had driven farther than he recognized. Spotting a familiar truck stop, he exited to refuel, reluctantly using his credit card, despite wanting to avoid a paper trail. After refueling, he grabbed a coffee and snack, then decided to head north on a 2-lane highway, eventually crossing into Nebraska. Around 4 a.m., his fuel light came on again, so he pulled over near a small town to rest. Despite driving for 10 to 12 hours, Kelly didn't feel sleepy, just disconnected the town. Hiani seemed familiar from a childhood vacation, but it took time to remember why he shut off the engine to save fuel, but soon had to restart it to warm up. Unfortunately, a loud noise under the hood and a battery issue forced him to shut it down again. Bad news number 3. Finding an old jacket in the truck. Kelly tried to stay warm. Occasionally he'd get out and walk around under the clear star-filled sky, marveling at the difference from Missouri's light, polluted nights. By morning he was shivering and decided to head to a nearby cafe. After warming up with coffee and breakfast, he asked about truck repairs. The waitress called her boyfriend, who ran a repair shop, and soon Kelly's truck was towed for repairs. The problem was that Kelly only had a little cash left. Not wanting to use his credit card and leave a trail, he visited a local bank, transferred money to a new account, and arranged for his truck's repairs. While there, he turned on his phone, which he usually kept off after work. To avoid Jerry's calls, he found multiple messages from Megan, Mark, and his mom. Assuming Megan had contacted his parents with some story. Kelly sent his mom a quick message explaining he needed time to think and was okay but far from home. Kelly then called his attorney, leaving a message about his estrangement from Megan and instructing him to restrict her access to his accounts and move funds to offshore accounts. An hour later, Kelly received an email from Lawrence Roberts expressing concern about Kelly and Megan's situation, but agreeing to carry out Kelly's request as long as they were legal. Lawrence mentioned knowing financial experts who could help. Kelly also asked Lawrence to arrange $2,000 monthly transfers to Megan to cover bills, including the house payment, since she needed a place to live, even though he wouldn't be staying there anymore. Kelly also realized that Megan might try to track him through his financial activities, and with his truck out of service for a few days, he needed a way to stay off the grid and cover expenses. He returned to the diner for lunch. Considering his options, the nearby ranchers seemed like a possibility for temporary work, as the waitress Tiffany suggested. However, he doubted his skills were suited for ranch work and worried about the lack of jobs in the small town. After pondering, Kelly decided to ask Tiffany about ranch jobs, and she pointed out Bill Blaze, a rancher who might need help during calving season. Kelly recalled a Zay Gray novel he read as a teen about an outsider adapting to life in the West and realized he might have to face similar challenges to earn respect if he took the job. Tiffany spoke with Mr. Blaze, who agreed to talk with Kelly. Approaching the rancher, Kelly sized him up. Bill Blaze was a large, rugged man about 60 years old, with rough, callous hands and a permanent squint. Bill assessed Kelly as a city guy not used to hard physical work. but they sat down to discuss the possibility of Kelly working on the ranch. Bill Blaze reached across the table to shake Kelly's hand, introducing himself as the owner of a ranch 10 miles north of town. Kelly introduced himself, seeing no reason to hide his name as Bill wouldn't know him from his real estate circles and Megan had no way of finding him here. They talked, with Bill describing his 1,015-acre ranch in the Sandhills where they moved cattle between pastures to manage the grass and water. Calving season was in full swing, and though it was hard work, he had a few hands helping out. When Bill asked what Kelly could do for him, Kelly was honest. He explained he had just left his wife after discovering her infidelity and needed work to stay off the grid while sorting out his life. Though he lacked ranching skills, Kelly was willing to work hard and learn, thinking physical labor might help clear his mind. Bill, experienced in dealing with city folk looking for a change, sized Kelly up. He saw potential and offered him a ride to the ranch. As Kelly's truck was in the shop, they stopped at a store for work clothes before heading to the ranch, which was a good half-hour drive from town. Bill showed Kelly around the ranch, pointing out the various vehicles, barns, and the main house where he lived with his wife Connie. They also stopped at the bunkhouse, a double-wide home with modern amenities, far from the rustic cabin Kelly had imagined. Before showing Kelly the bunkhouse, Bill discussed pay. He offered $2,000 a month plus free housing and food. The bunkhouse had a fully equipped kitchen with separate freezers and pantries for each worker to avoid any issues with food sharing. Bill showed Kelly his assigned pantry and freezer, mentioning he could store drinks, booze, or other items there and in the fridge. He provided keys and noted that beef, pork, chicken, and turkey were supplied. Bill also pointed out a computer for accessing recipes and shared the Wi-Fi password in the hallway. Bill introduced Kelly to the bunkhouse setup. David Butch Tierney's room, Terry Haslocken's room, and finally Kelly's room. Kelly was surprised by the spaciousness, which included a double bed dresser, small desk, TV, and private bathroom. Bill showed him the linen closet with extra bedding and towels. Kelly mentioned he needed personal care items, and Bill suggested that Connie, his wife, could pick them up during her trip to Alliance. Kelly quickly made a list and gave it to Bill before meeting Connie, who warmly agreed to help. Kelly was then introduced to Butch and Hass. Butch, who quickly nicknamed Kelly Missouri, took him out to the pasture in a UTV. Butch explained that the herd was kept nearby for easier monitoring during calving season. He pointed out cows ready to cow and explained the challenges of protecting newborns from coyotes, showing Kelly the 00.2000 and 23 rifle used for carnivore control. After circling the herd, they stopped for Kelly to practice shooting the rifle. Satisfied with his aim, Butch mentioned other potential dangers like prairie rattlesnakes, though it was still too cold for them to be active. On their way back, they encountered a cow giving birth. Butch explained ranching, conservation practices, and the importance of caring for the land. After the calf was born, Butch tagged it, gave it a shot of vitamins and antibiotics, and carefully monitored the protective mother. He explained that weak calves sometimes needed extra care in the barn, but assured Kelly this one seemed strong and ready to stay with its mother. The young bull quickly stood on shaky legs and began nursing from his mother. Butch chuckled, satisfied that instinct to nurse shows how strong the calf is, just like with humans. Kelly, reflecting on his troubles with Megan, felt a mix of satisfaction from what he witnessed and sadness over his situation. Butch kept Kelly busy, showing him various ranch equipment. Kelly learned that on the ranch, vehicles were left unlocked with the keys inside, a habit he needed to adopt to avoid putting anyone in danger from the elements. Butch also gave Kelly an extra coat and a hat, advising him to wash them before use. As they prepared for night checks on the cows, Butch explained the routine. They would check the cows every few hours, and with rain expected, it was important to stay dry and warm. Later, Butcher Hass demonstrated how to operate the pickup with a bale lift used to feed the cows. Kelly marveled at the efficiency compared to the old days of handling bales by hand, which explained the breeding process and how they managed the herd, including separating bulls from cows until breeding season and checking cows for pregnancy. Those that couldn't produce were sold, with some eventually ending up as meat for the ranch. Kelly was overwhelmed by the differences between this life and his previous one, noting the trust and physical demands of the ranch. Despite the challenges, he appreciated the balance of hard work and modern conveniences. As they waited for Connie to return with supplies, Butch shared his food with Kelly. Grateful, Kelly decided to cook dinner: sloppy joes and mac and cheese, reflecting on his past life with Megan and wondering how often she had deceived him. After supper, Butch quickly cleared the table, loaded the dishwasher, and added Haas's dishes. Missouri put his clothes in the dryer, and they all called it a night. Missouri went to his room, made the bed, and worked on his real estate proposal. However, he struggled with poor phone reception on the ranch, eventually stepping outside to make a few necessary calls. One of his contacts wasn't thrilled about the late call, but understood after Kelly explained his situation. After finalizing the details, Kelly returned indoors to warm up and saw multiple missed messages from Megan, which he deleted without reading. He assumed she was just worried about finding him not ready to deal with her, yet he knew the funds he arranged would cover the house payments and utilities. But Megan could manage her own groceries. Before bed, he set an alarm for 1:30 a.m. to join Butch at 2 a.m. for cow checks, planning to help pull a few calves as part of his training. That night, Missouri got to help pull his first calf. It was a difficult process with shadows making visibility tricky, but they managed to deliver the calf successfully. The newborn stood and nursed quickly while the cow ate the placenta. Missouri tagged and inoculated the calf under Butch's guidance. Later, Haas took over and Missouri caught a few hours of sleep before joining Haas again at 5 a.m. Unfortunately, they had to deal with a not-alive calf, which they removed to avoid attracting coyotes. After a quick breakfast, they resumed their routine of feeding and checking the cows. This became Missouri's daily life throughout the month as calving season continued. As the weather warmed and grass greened, he started learning how to ride horses and repair fences. He took a few falls but quickly learned the ropes both literally and figuratively. Butcher Haas taught him roping skills, though mastering the lasso took time and effort. Despite sore arms and frequent failures, Missouri gradually improved under their patient instruction. By the end of April, the fences were in good shape, ready for the cows and calves. Although Missouri improved his roping skills, it was decided he'd be better at throwing calves during branding. Their ranch was scheduled to host branding in midday, but first they would help at neighboring ranches. Missouri's truck was repaired, but he decided to store it in town since he didn't need it at the ranch. Around this time, Bill approached him for a private conversation. "Kelly, I wanted to let you know that your wife will likely find out where you are. Soon the state patrol noticed your truck in town and started asking questions because someone, probably your wife, reported you missing. There's a new initiative like an Amber Alert for adults." Kelly nodded, realizing his past was catching up with him. "The patrol is checking around since you didn't hide your identity. They haven't come to me yet, but they will. Soon. You don't need to leave, but I'm curious why you're here. In not talking to your family." Kelly explained his situation, losing his job, discovering his wife's infidelity, and needing time away to figure things out. He shared his struggle to decide what to do next. Even though he had savings secured and had arranged to provide Megan with monthly support, this ranch job has been a blessing. It's helped me more than anything else. I'm physically tired, not mentally drained, and that's been good for me. Bill asked what Kelly planned to do if Megan showed up. Kelly admitted he hadn't decided yet, though he knew he couldn't hide forever. Bill reassured him, explaining that the patrol would likely talk to him in town soon. He also mentioned that the locals had accepted him, referring to him as Missouri rather than Kelly. If someone from his past showed up, Bill would alert him on the radio, leaving it up to Kelly to decide how to respond. Kelly thanked Bill and returned to work. A few days later, a state patrolman arrived at the ranch. Bill called Kelly to the house, where Kelly assured the officer he was fine. The patrolman advised Kelly to keep his family informed to avoid unnecessary worry and law enforcement involvement. Kelly promised to do so. Missouri began planning his next steps, knowing his pickup would be watched. He didn't want to see Megan, especially if she brought Mark and Mary. He discussed his plans with Bill, who agreed to help. Kelly ordered supplies, and over the next week, deliveries arrived regularly. He packed his gear, purchased a weapon, a rifle and ammunition during a trip to Alliance. Branding season began, and Missouri found the work tough, but rewarding. He was better suited to handling calves than roping them. The process involved separating the calves from the cows, branding them, and castrating the young bulls. It was exhausting, dirty work, but it kept Missouri's mind off his troubles. As branding wrapped up, Missouri made final plans to Leeville, remarked that he now looked more like a ranch hand than a city slicker. Missouri asked Bill to store his gear while he went away for a while, and Bill agreed. One evening, Bill informed Missouri that Connie had visitors, 3 people including a woman who identified herself as Kelly's wife. Connie told them Kelly was working on another ranch and wouldn't return for a few days. Missouri decided to leave before Megan returned. He hoped to stay away long enough for her to give up and go home. Packing his belongings, Missouri shook hands with Bill, now a friend, and prepared to leave without saying goodbye to Butch or Hoss. As Missouri packed, Butch came out and asked, "Going someplace, Missouri?" "Yeah," Missouri replied. "I gotta see what's over the horizon. It's time to move on." Butch nodded in understanding. "It's a woman, right?" Missouri nodded, confirming Butcher's guess. "Yeah, I'm not ready to deal with her." "Bill said she came by today, so it's time to go. I'll talk to her when I'm ready, but for now I'll keep moving." Butch asked where he was heading and if Megan might be watching his truck. Missouri shrugged. "I don't know which direction yet, and yes, she's probably watching the truck. I'll come back for it later." After packing, Missouri adjusted his hat, mounted his horse, and headed north. Inspired by an old Zane Grey novel, he planned to stay off highways, making it harder for Megan to find him. He packed supplies, including camping gear, freeze-dried meals, water clothes, and a solar charger for his electronics. After a few days, Missouri reached a ranch where the owner, Ronnie Bentley, greeted him with the old custom light and said stranger. Ronnie mentioned that Bill Blaze had called, letting him know Missouri might be passing through and could use work. Missouri accepted the offer. Ronnie, in his 70s, was dealing with arthritis and needed help on his 8-acre ranch. Missouri settled in taking care of the horses and enjoying a meal in a shower courtesy of Ronnie's wife, Mile. The next morning, Ronnie showed Missouri around the ranch, and Missouri spent the week fixing fences and moving bales. One afternoon, Ronnie informed Missouri that some people had come by looking for Kelly. Free. Ronnie claimed not to know him, but he warned Missouri that they seemed suspicious. Missouri thanked Ronnie and decided to leave the next morning. When asked about the visitor's return, Ronnie said they were checking nearby ranches and might circle back. Missouri sighed, acknowledging that Megan was probably still searching but wished she would move on with her life. Missouri headed to the barn where his horses and belongings were kept. He had been sleeping in the guest room and only brought essentials into the house daily. At the Double B, he maintained a beard and mustache, only shaving his neck. He used their internet to check on his pickup and sent emails to Bill Blaze and his parents assuring them he was fine without revealing his location. The next morning, after a hearty breakfast, Missouri packed up and ordered supplies to be delivered to Gordon, Nebraska, where he planned to stop in about a week. After leaving the Double B, rain slowed his progress, and he found shelter in an old barn. There he tended to his horses and ate a hot meal before resting. The following days were clear, and by week's end, Missouri arrived outside Gordon. He staked his horses near a stream and walked into town, gathering supplies and enjoying a cold Coca-Cola. After picking up his ordered supplies, he visited the library to catch up on news and send emails. His attorney informed him that Megan was frequently asking about him, but had not mentioned divorce. His parents were supportive, but urged him to return home. After leaving the library, Missouri treated himself to a meal at a local cafe. While eating, he overheard a conversation from the booth behind him. He recognized Megan's voice as she expressed determination to find him, convinced he was nearby. The other person, likely Mary, voiced frustration, believing Kelly didn't want to be found and suspecting locals were helping him evade them. Megan, sounding desperate, admitted she should have discussed polyamory with Kelly sooner and hoped to explain that her love for him hadn't diminished. Despite wanting to include others in their relationship, she lamented that Kelly wouldn't respond to her attempts to contact him. Mary, frustrated, pointed out the challenges of finding him and the strain their search was putting on their jobs. Megan sighed. "I told my boss my husband is missing and she's been patient, but I need to work for a couple of weeks before coming back to search again. I believe he's still in the Sandhills, though I don't know why he never mentioned this place, has no family here and couldn't work without a vehicle. Do you think he bought a new car and left his truck in Hyanni to throw us off?" Mary replied in a low voice, making it hard for Missouri to catch everything. "I doubt it. He hasn't spent much money since leaving other than some fuel receipts. There's been nothing. The only reason we know he's around is because a state patrolman talked to him at the first ranch. We checked the rancher must have tipped him off because we didn't get much help there." Megan sounded puzzled. "I can't see Kelly doing ranch work. He's an office guy, not someone who'd live primitive without internet and modern comforts." "I couldn't do that." Missouri nearly laughed, remembering his own misconceptions about ranch life. When he first arrived at the Circle Bar, he was relieved that Mary's comments would likely turn people in the cafe against helping them. He realized he was starting to think of Kelly as a stranger, someone from a past life. Kelly Free was a man with responsibilities, but Missouri was a ranch hand with no ties. He knew he'd eventually have to reconcile the two identities, but today wasn't the day. Megan's voice pulled him back to the present. Mary, I'm going to check the library again. Kelly will need to send emails to his lawyer, and I know his passwords. If he's online, I might track him down. Missouri cursed silently. He had forgotten Megan knew his passwords. He needed to change them immediately and ensure nothing compromising was in his emails. The two women finished their meal and left without noticing Missouri hidden behind his full beard and mustache. Megan had never liked facial hair, so she wouldn't recognize him easily. After they left, Missouri finished his coffee, paid his bill, and bought some supplies, including hard candy and whiskey for medicinal purposes. Returning to his camp, Missouri was startled to find someone rifling through his belongings. Instinctively, he drew his 00.45 and aimed it at the intruder, hands up. Missouri commanded the man, froze and slowly stood. When he turned around, Missouri recognized Mark Brooks, but he didn't let on. What do you think you're doing? Sonny, Missouri asked coldly. Mark stammered, I'm looking for someone. Missouri kept the weapon steady. Well, dumbass. You won't find him in my bags. Empty your pockets. Missouri glared at Mark, his voice sharp and commanding. Listen, I suggest you be careful. It's not a good idea to mess with other people's belongings out here now. Empty your pockets. Looking for someone isn't an excuse for stealing. Mark stammered. No, I'm really looking for someone. My best friend Kelly Free, my wife and his wife are in town searching for him. I thought he might be camping near here, so I was just checking the bags to see if they belonged to him. Please, you have to believe me. Missouri considered Mark's words, but kept his voice low and threatening. Maybe I believe you, maybe I don't. Now empty your pockets on that log, or I'll put a hole where you don't want one. When Mark hesitated, Missouri fired around near his feet, causing Mark to panic and quickly comply. Missouri kept his identity hidden, his beard, mustache, and hat helping with the disguise. After confirming Mark had nothing of his, Missouri told him to put everything back, backing Mark to the edge of the camp. Missouri asked, Don't you just leave this person alone as he holstered his weapon? Mark replied, He's my friend and he's hurting. We want to bring him home so he can heal. His wife wants to apologize and get him back in her life. She just wants to talk to him face to face. She loves him, and he's been gone for months. Mark then studied Missouri more closely, suspicion growing. What's your name, stranger? He asked. They call me Missouri, came the reply. Mark, growing more suspicious, asked, Why do they call you that? Missouri shrugged. Everyone needs a name. Texas is too common, Kansas isn't popular here, and Nebraska is just plain dumb. If I were in Missouri, I'd be called something else. Mark pressed further, What's your real name? In an instant, the 00.45 was out again. It's best not to pry into things that don't concern you. You should probably move along before things get complicated. Terrified, Mark backed away and eventually ran off without looking back. Missouri smirked, knowing his disguise had worked for now. Realizing he needed to move quickly, Missouri broke camp in just 10 minutes, leading his horses downstream to avoid detection. He circled around Gordon, negotiating fences and avoiding attention. By nightfall, he found shelter at a farmstead, where the owner, a single woman living with her widowed mother, invited him in for supper. After allowing him to stable his horses and bed down in the barn, Martha laughed when Missouri questioned her hospitality. Missouri, everyone around here is looking out for you. Those 3 idiots came to town again, but no one gave them any information. We know who you are, but we also know you're a hard worker, respectful, and a friend to those in need. So, you're one of us. They'll keep looking. But eventually they'll go home. They come every other weekend asking questions, but we all agree. You have your reasons for being here and not talking to her someday. Maybe you'll share your story, but honestly, the gossip is probably better. Missouri smiled and then shared his story with her, starting with his belief that bad things happen in threes. After hearing it all, Martha smiled back. You know, sometimes bad things turn out to be blessings. Losing your job. That boss of yours was terrible, pushing you to live beyond your means. Now you have the freedom to do things your way and plenty of clients who'd support that. Finding out about your wife's infidelity. It was a blessing in disguise. Better to know now than continue living in the dark, and your truck breaking down. It led you here where you found a new way of life. I think God was guiding you to heal. Martha continued, You've changed. Your wife didn't recognize you, and that guy at your camp might have doubted it was really you. You look older with a beard, longer hair, and no sunglasses. Your voice is rusty from not talking much. Mark wouldn't have recognized it. Missouri chuckled he was too focused on my weapon. Martha laughed. That story is going to give everyone a good laugh. I shouldn't share what you told me, but I might have to when I'm in town tomorrow. Missouri finally found something to smile about. Martha, a funny and warm-hearted woman, was a stark contrast to her more brusque mother. He stayed with them for a few days before heading back to town. In town, he camped on the outskirts and walked in to do his business. He first stopped at the library using their Wi-Fi to set up a new email account and contacting his attorney, Lawrence. He confirmed with Lawrence that all his money had been safely moved out of the country, making it hard for Megan to access. Lawrence warned that the courts could still demand an accounting of his assets and might order him to give up 50% in a divorce. Missouri asked, "What if I never file for divorce?" Lawrence replied Mega could file for divorce, citing abandonment, and the court would still divide the assets. Missouri then asked, "But what if she can't find me to serve the papers?" Lawrence replied, "Even if she can't find you, the court can still rule against you. I can represent you in your absence, but judges usually don't like that and might penalize you for not showing up." He paused, then added, "The courts tend to favor the woman in these cases." In the past, men often walked away with most of the assets, leaving their wives and children struggling. Now it's the opposite. They assume the man earns more, which was true for you until you lost your job. Her lawyer will argue that you didn't give her enough under community property laws, and the court will likely side with her, punishing you for leaving. They rarely consider what the man is going through, especially in big cities where the system leans against men. Missouri sighed. "Can we file here where I've established residency and have a local court handle it?" Lawrence shook his head. "No, since your marriage took place in Missouri, and that's where most of your married life was. It has to be heard there. If she established residency where you are now, it might be different." Missouri resigned himself. "I guess we'll keep things as they are. I'll keep moving for now. There's plenty of land for me to cover and it'll make her search harder. I'll contact you when I can. Let's continue as we have been." A few days later, Missouri walked into town and bought a pay-as-you-go phone to avoid being tracked back at his camp. He had a decent signal and decided to call Megan. He first tried the house but then remembered she might be at work. He called her office and was put through to her extension. She answered professionally. "Hello, this is Megan. Free. How may I help you?" Missouri's voice was calm but pointed, surprised. "You're still using my name. Why not take the Brooks name?" Megan hesitated, confused. Is this a joke?" Missouri replied sharply. "What, you don't recognize your husband? Maybe Mark's voice is more familiar. Now surprised you're at work instead of with your friends." Ignoring his jabs, Megan asked, "Is this really you?" "Kelly, this isn't a prank, right?" Missouri softened but remained firm. "Why would anyone pretend to be me? I've made sure people can reach you if they spot me. Most calls are false leads, but occasionally someone calls with useful info and no, this isn't my number. I'm avoiding being tracked. I want you to stop looking for me. File for divorce. The court will give you half of everything, and I'll make it available. Just forget me and move on." Megan's tone turned, pleading Melly. "I love you and miss you. Please come home or meet me so I can show you how I feel." Missouri's voice grew cold again. "You love me so much. You cheated with our friends and expected me to be okay with it. How long were you planning to keep this up behind my back? Don't lie." "Did you know I'd come home early that day?" Megan hesitated, then admitted. "I was trying to introduce polyamory, but I was afraid of how you'd react. I guess I was right. You didn't take it well." Missouri's sarcasm cut through. "No kidding, what gave you that idea?" He sighed, then continued. "It doesn't matter anymore. Your excuses mean nothing. Just leave me alone." There was silence before Megan's voice shaky said, "I love you and miss you. I want you back in my home and my bed." "Please don't hang up." Missouri responded with frustration and resignation. "Why do you want me back? I send you $2,000 a month, and you likely got a raise with your promotion. You have Mark and Mary. Why do you need me? You enjoy being with them, so what's the point of having me around, especially the way I am now?" Megan's voice broke as she cried. "No. You don't understand. I love Mary and Mark, but I'm in love with you. They never replaced you. We don't share the connection you and I have or the dreams we had together. I want that back," Missouri snorted in disbelief. "That's not happening. I don't think about you except to wonder if we'll cross paths. I'm still deciding if I'll just walk away, slap you, or give you some old-fashioned justice." Megan's voice trembled. "What do you mean?" By frontier justice, Missouri's tone turned serious in the old days. Adulterous women and their lovers could be liquidated, and no one cared around here. Half the people still think that way. The rest think I'm a fool for staying in the city. I won't know how I'll react until we meet face to face. Consider yourself warned." Megan continued to cry, and Missouri heard some background noise. She covered the phone and told someone she was fine, just trying to talk to her husband. When she returned to the call, Missouri had already hung up. As Missouri turned off the phone and prepared lunch, he reflected on how little he thought about Mian anymore. His focus was on practical matters: his next destination, the weather, and helping the next rancher. Megan and their failed marriage rarely crossed his mind, except for the occasional reminder of her betrayal. He realized that distancing himself from Megan was working as he had hoped. His anger was cooling and indifference was setting in soon. He might just shrug at the memory of her and their marriage. After finishing lunch, he decided it was time to file for divorce and take control away from her. He sent the necessary message through his new email account. The next morning, Missouri broke camp early and headed south, planning to visit Bill and Connie Blaze at the Circle Bar X. With the season changing, he wanted a more permanent situation before the first frost. Halfway to Hyenas, he spotted smoke on the horizon and worried about a wildfire. As he got closer, the smoke began to dissipate, indicating the fire was out. Cresting a hill, he saw a helicopter wreck in a meadow. The fire had burned out without spreading to the grass. Riding closer, he saw someone moving near the wreckage, a woman dragging something. He called out, "Hello, the camp." Not wanting to startle her, she waved him in without hesitation. As Missouri approached, she looked up and said, "I'm so glad to see someone. We went down yesterday and thought rescue would come sooner." Missouri dismounted and asked, "Are you the only survivor?" "No. My partner Jane is injured. She's over there under the shelter. I think she fractured her back. The pilot didn't make it," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. Missouri guessed it was a medical helicopter. "Where were you headed?" "We were flying from North Platte to Valentine. We had electrical problems. The pilot tried to land, but the engine stalled. We were too low to land safely after the crash. I got Jane out, but I couldn't reach Sam before the fire started. He was unconscious, so I hope he didn't suffer," she explained. Missouri took in the situation. "Why are you so far west if you were heading to Valentine?" He pointed northeast. "It's that way, and you're off course." She looked frustrated. "That explains why we haven't been found. They must be searching east of here." After a power search, Sam didn't trust the GPS. The radio also went out and we didn't have time to use the sat phone before the crash. Missouri asked, "Can you use the sat phone now?" "It burned in the fire. I managed to save the survival gear but couldn't get the phone out in time," she said, regretful. Missouri nodded. "I understand there's no cell service here either. I see a ranch house about 10 miles south. If the fences aren't too bad, I can get there in a couple of hours and call for help. I've marked your location on my GPS, so they won't have trouble finding you. I'll leave my pack horse here. There's food, a stove, and a tent if you need them." The paramedic nodded. "Thankful we'll stay near the helicopter in case the emergency locator starts working." Missouri quickly unloaded his pack horse, staked it out, and mounted his other horse before leaving, he said. "When rescue comes, just tell them to leave my horse in packs. I'll be back to get them." She nodded. "Good luck." "Thank you for getting help." Missouri spurred his horse into a fast pace, knowing he needed to move quickly. He only stopped to lower a few fences, making sure they could cross safely, but he didn't waste time repairing them. True to his estimate, Missouri reached the ranch after a couple of hours. Fortunately, the rancher was home, so Missouri didn't need to search for the phone. After explaining the situation, the rancher called the authorities. The local fire department and ambulance were about 30 minutes away, so the rancher and his crew quickly loaded their pickups and UAVs with blankets, food, water, and bandages, then headed out with Missouri's GPS coordinates. Missouri stayed behind to care for his horse. He saw a couple of helicopters overhead, likely heading to the crash site. He assumed the sheriff's department had notified them of the location. The paramedic and Jane would soon be on their way to the hospital. After resting his horse, Missouri headed back to retrieve his pack horse and supplies, fixing the fences as he went. When he returned to the crash site, the fire department and ambulance were there. The sheriff and deputies were securing the area, waiting for the NTSB. Missouri noticed the pilot's body hadn't been moved yet, but he knew it wasn't his concern anymore. He focused on packing his horse to continue his journey. As he prepared to leave, a man with a badge stopped him in all the commotion. "We never got your name. The investigators will probably want to know who you are." "You're the guy called Missouri, right?" Missouri nodded. "Yeah, that's me if possible. I'd prefer to just be Missouri in the reports. I'm not ready to face my wife yet, so I need to keep moving. Also, please don't mention which direction I'm heading." The sheriff nodded, understanding none of the firefighters or EMTs were close enough to overhear. Later, they'd just say that they looked up and Missouri was gone, disappearing over the nearest hill. The sheriff, though, wasn't naive. He knew Missouri's real name and informed the NTSB investigators, but kept it from the news reporters who arrived on the scene. Unbeknownst to Missouri, his travels were becoming legendary. Megan and the Brooks continued their visits to the area, but each time they asked about Missouri, people claimed to have seen him in different places, often miles apart. On the same day, stories of him rescuing ranchers and travelers circulated, with everyone knowing someone who'd spotted him. Some described him wearing a clean white hat like the Lone Ranger. Others mentioned a black hat, his horses. Two became part of the legend. Some said he rode a nearly white PA Mino, others a roan or a paint. Tales of his exploits and local rodeos where he supposedly won Alvaro Cowboy added to his mythical status, and while some young women hinted at having helped him during tough times, they all described him as a true gentleman. When Missouri was near the Circle Bar, a state patrolman stopped him. It was unusual, as Missouri wasn't speeding on horseback and he had been careful. To stay off the highway, avoiding any chance encounters with Megan and her crew, the patrolman waited at a gate for Missouri to approach, noting that he now carried a 00.45 on his hip. "Say, son, could you stop for a moment? I'd like to chat if you don't mind," the patrolman said. Missouri leaned back in the saddle. "Sure, I've got time, just heading down the road a bit." The patrolman chuckled. "That wouldn't be to Bill Blaze's ranch. Would it where it is? You're close with him." Missouri smiled, "More like mentor and boss when I first came here. Hard to believe it's only been a few months. Feels like longer with winter coming. I'm hoping he'll need help through the season." "Oh, I don't think that'll be a problem. Last time I spoke with him, he mentioned, 'You're always welcome.' He figured I might run into you and asked me to pass that along." The patrolman said, then paused before asking, "Have you talked with your wife?" "She still checks in occasionally." Missouri sighed. "I spoke to her once, told her to file for divorce and move on." "Why is she still bothering you?" The patrolman shrugged. "Might have something to do with all the stories going around." "Stories? What stories?" Missouri asked, curious. The patrolman then shared all the tales of Missouri's supposed exploits, heroic rescues, rodeo wins, and more. Missouri was both amazed and baffled in one summer. "No one could do even a fraction of what you're telling me," Missouri said, shaking his head. The patrolman laughed. "We know that. But a little mystery, a bit of romance, and a couple of real event stories take on a life of their own." Missouri chuckled. "Sounds like those old dime novels about the Wild West. Probably a lot of made-up stuff with real names thrown in." "Yeah, they probably wouldn't sell now, but funny enough, there are at least 3 people on social media claiming to be you. They argue over who's the real Missouri. Oddly, none of them use your real name. Either they don't know it or are keeping the mystery alive. All you need is a black mask, and someone will start calling you the Lone Ranger," the patrolman said. With a grin, Missouri touched his beard. "Guess I'd need to be clean-shaven to play the hero." They both laughed. After a friendly chat, the patrolman let Missouri continue on his way, and as the patrolman shared his encounter with his colleagues, the legend of Missouri grew even more. A day later, Missouri returned to Circle Bar Axe, ready to see if Bill needed help for the winter. If so, he figured he'd settle in for the colder months. His roping skills had improved during his travels, and while he wasn't a top hand yet, he felt confident enough to offer his services. If Bill didn't need him, he could always check in with others, like Ronnie Bentley at the Double B. Missouri's arrival at the ranch was low-key. He didn't come in like a hero in an old western, and he figured someone had already spotted him before he reached the yard. Sure enough, Bill, Connie and Butch came out to greet him as he pulled up. "Howdy, stranger. Bet you could use a good cup of coffee in a comfy chair." After roaming around the hills, Bill said, with a grin. Missouri chuckled. "Yes, sir. That sounds good. Mind if I put my horses in your corral?" Bill pretended to think about it. "Well, now, are you still the same Missouri who left here last summer?" Connie playfully swatted Bill. "Missouri, don't pay attention to him. Just take care of your horses and come on in." Bill and Butch laughed as they helped Missouri unload his gear and settle his horses in the corral. They hauled his belongings to the bunkhouse where Missouri was glad to see he still had his old room. Cass had moved on, and there was a new young hand, Jesse, whom Butch introduced. "Missouri, meet Jesse, though I call him Outlaw. He's green as they come, but we've got hopes for him," Butch said with a grin. Jesse, awed to meet the legendary Missouri, could barely manage a handshake later. Butch confided that Jesse claimed to be 18, but Bill suspected he was a 16-year-old runaway. They were checking with the sheriff's department but planned to keep things quiet until they knew more. Connie made sure Jesse had dinner at the ranch house each night. That evening, Connie invited Missouri and Butch over for dinner to celebrate Missouri's return. Over the meal, Missouri shared highlights of his travels, including overhearing his wife and her lover in the Gordon Cafe. Bill and Butch found his account of running into Mark Young particularly amusing, while Jesse listened wide-eyed. After dinner, the group entertained themselves by spinning exaggerated tales about Missouri's exploits. Bill took the lead with a wildly embellished story about the medical helicopter rescue. According to the latest internet story, Bill began with a grin. "You rode in at a fast lope, jumped off your horse, and swept up the swooning paramedic Casey just as a tornado bore down on them. Then you built a cabin to protect them, rode into the storm to save the day, hacked a cell tower to call for help, and led the rescuers back to the site, where you pulled the pilot from the wreckage and led a prayer for him." Missouri was stunned. He quickly corrected the story. "Hell, I didn't even know the paramedic's name. The pilot was still in the wreckage when I got back from my pack horse, because the NTSB had told the sheriff to leave him there." The stories continued with sightings of Missouri and his variously described horses spanning the sandhills from O'Neill to Alliance, and even as far north as Mott, South Dakota, and south to McCook, Nebraska. They all laughed at the improbability of a man covering so much ground on horseback in just a few months. Connie, examining Missouri's face and scalp for injuries, joked that every town he passed through reported him defending women and girls from attackers. With Missouri easily taking down the biggest and toughest of them, the tales of his fights were just more fuel for his growing legend. It was a pleasant evening with old friends and a new one, even Outlaw. The young hand relaxed and began joking with Missouri, just like the others. Eventually, Bill asked Missouri about his plans. "Well, I'm hoping you could use some help this winter. I'm done wandering for now. If Megan shows up again, I'll talk to her and make it clear that we're done. She can have the house and half my money if she doesn't fight the divorce. If she wants to fight, I'll use my story to ruin her and her lovers. It's her choice." Bill and Connie nodded. Bill spoke first. "Of course, you have a place here at the Circle Bar. We're mostly caught up, but we still need to haul the hay bales back to the ranch for winter feed with you here. We'll get that done quickly, and then just keep an eye on the cows until it's time to bring them in." Connie added, "Word's gotten out that this is where you started your journey, so we've had a few visitors checking to see if you've returned. You've got quite a following around here." Missouri nodded. "If it's okay, I'd prefer to be out riding fence when visitors show up. I wouldn't know what to tell any of them except not to believe everything they hear." Bill paused, then asked, "So, will you meet with them if they show up? I don't know when that Jane woman will be released from the hospital. Her injuries were pretty serious, according to the news." Missouri agreed. "Yeah, I'll meet with them. That paramedic Casey had things under control. When I got there, she used my tent to make Jane more comfortable and fed them until help arrived. By the time I got back, they'd already been airlifted out, probably to a hospital in North Placid or Kearney. I'm not sure where they went. The fire guys and EMTs on site didn't know either." That supper set the tone for Missouri's return. He learned that Bill had retrieved his pickup from Hyani, and it was now stored in one of the sheds. Missouri set it up to pull a used horse trailer he bought locally, so if he needed to travel again, he could take his horses with him. He also went to Alliance to replace his worn-out clothes, and no one recognized him with his new hat and trimmed-down beard. True to his word. Bill sent Missouri out on horseback whenever visitors showed up at the ranch. They would often laugh at the ongoing reports of Missouri sightings, even though he'd hardly left the ranch in weeks. As fall progressed, the days grew shorter, and there was a chill in the air each night. They finished moving the hay bales to the winter pastures, and Missouri continued to ride fence, practicing his roping skills and always carrying his 00.45 in case of coyotes or badgers. In early November, the inevitable happened. Megan arrived at the Circle Bar X with the Brooks. It was the first time she'd come to the ranch, although she'd visited the area many times during her search. She was invited inside while Missouri was sent for, but the Brooks were told in no uncertain terms that they weren't welcome and should stay in the car. They bristled at first, but Butch had a quiet word with them, and they quickly backed down. Butch later told Bill he'd mentioned the abundance of empty space for lonely graves, which seemed to deflate their arrogance. He did bring them some water while Megan met with her estranged husband inside. Connie introduced herself and Bill to Megan and offered her a seat at the dining room table with a glass of water. They made no attempt at small talk, viewing Megan as the enemy of their friend and employee. After a long 30-minute wait, Megan heard footsteps approaching from the kitchen. The man who entered the room seemed like a stranger taller than her husband, with longer hair, a black Western hat pulled low, and a mustache and goatee. He barely acknowledged her as he sat down across from her, crossed his legs, and leaned back. "Well, Megan, you finally found me. I'm ready to end this once and for all so you can move on with your life," he said calmly. Megan didn't respond right away, struggling to reconcile this cowboy with the husband she once knew. Finally, she extended her hand to Missouri. "Is it really you?" "Kelly?" He nodded. She glanced around, noticing Connie peeking from around the corner. "Is this some kind of sick joke? I've been searching for my husband for months, and you bring in some ranch hand to pose as Kelly Free. Do you think I'm a fool? Where is my husband?" Connie shook her head and pointed at Missouri. "This is the man who came to our ranch. Broken and striking, he told us his name but never used it again after that day. This is Missouri, formerly known as Kelly Free. He's grown and matured since you knew him. He's a better man than you deserve. You need to talk, sort your lives out, and let him finish healing, so you both can move on." Megan protested. "But this is a stranger. How could you do this to me? You say Kelly is here, but you bring in this guy." She broke down in tears. "I need my husband. I need Kelly. Please bring him to me. I beg you. I've been searching for so long." She buried her head in her hands. "Megan, listen." Kelly hesitated, then continued. "I am Kelly Free. Even if I don't look like the man you knew, you started a new relationship with Mary and Mark Brooks and expected me to accept it, maybe even join in. I was so shocked and hurt that I had to leave. I drove here, got a job, and learned new things. Now I'm ready to confront you." Megan shook her head, struggling to accept that this man with his rugged appearance could be her Kelly. But as Kelly shared details, only they would know she realized it was him. He removed his hat and laid it on the table. Slowly she accepted that this man was her husband, though he now seemed like a figure from the Old West, complete with a semi-automatic pistol on his hip. Kelly noticed her unease and carefully placed the weapon on the table. "I carry it for protection while writing. It feels so natural now that I forget to take it off," Megan asked. "But why did you leave me?" "I love you. I left because it was clear I wasn't enough for you. You broke our vows, took other lovers without talking to me, and disrespected our marriage. I had to leave to process everything. I finally come to terms with it, but it was just Mary and Mark, our friends. We were just getting closer. Maybe you felt that way, but I felt betrayed. I walked in on you all, having Z's in our home, in our bedroom. I had to leave before I did something I'd regret." Megan looked shocked. "What do you mean by that? When I saw you, I couldn't decide whether to cry, throw up, or hurt all of you when you approached me. I was so repulsed that the only option was to leave, so I did." Kelly paused, seeing her denial. "I drove for hours trying to avoid making a decision about us. When I ended up stranded in Hyani, I had to face the reality of what you'd done. Our marriage ended that day. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal. I wasn't ready to confront you, so I took a job here at the Circle Bar X." He continued. "These people welcomed me a stranger. They taught me how to work hard and treated me with respect, something you took away from me." Connie nodded in agreement with Missouri's words and added, "We did all that and more, some of which Missouri might never know." Bill and Butch were often just a few miles away from where Missouri camped, ready to help if needed, but they were proud he never did. He matured into a hero straight out of a Zane Grey or Louis Labor novel. A man you could trust. He became a true sandheer, accepted wherever he went. Whether he stays here or returns to the city, he will stand tall. Megan looked down, still struggling to grasp the reality she had believed Kelly was hurting, and would run back to her when they met in her mind. He would embrace her lifestyle, and they would rekindle their relationship. She just needed to get him alone. Kelly noticed her expression and realized she still clung to her plans from last spring. There would be no reconciliation. He tried again. Megan. Now that you believe I'm Kelly, let's get down to business. When you get home, you'll be served with divorce papers. Please just sign them and let it happen. I've been generous in the settlement. You can then live your life with the Brooks. She shook her head. No, I don't accept that. You just need to experience the love we share. You'll understand once you see how amazing it is to be with two women. No, Megan, that's not for me. Leave and don't try to see me again. I'll be at the hearing. If you fight the divorce, I'll tell the world what happened. Your parents and friends won't want anything to do with you. The Brooks will likely abandon you when things get tough. Just sign the papers and live your life. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Megan, struggling to stand, revealed her swollen belly, so Mark Swimmers did the job. What do you do? Do your parents know? Or are you lying to them? She gestured to her belly. This is your baby, Kelly. I hope the news would bring you around. Mark and Mary even agreed to be godparents. Kelly laughed bitterly. Do you really expect me to believe that? You think news of a pregnancy, possibly mine, but likely Mark, would make me join your mess. You're more delusional than I thought. At the kitchen door. Kelly turned. When the baby is born, we'll do a DNA test. If it's mine, I'll pay child support, but I won't ask for visitation or custody. The child can call Mark Dad. He walked out the door. Megan ran after him, but only caught a glimpse of him riding away without looking back. Finally, she realized the consequences of her choices. Kelly wouldn't even acknowledge their baby. Her job was shaky after all the time off, and her relationship with the Brooks was losing its appeal. They seemed more focused on their own pleasure than hers. Megan returned to the dining room where Connie was still seated. She looked at the ranch wife he really is. The father Mark had a vasectomy years ago. There's been no one else. Connie couldn't resist. Seems like you forgot what exclusive means. Megan collapsed into a chair. I thought this was the way people loving each other without jealousy, fully connected. Everything I read online made it seem perfect. The statistics, said P.O. Relationships had less cheating and more happiness. Connie shook her head. You can't believe everything online. Most cultures abandon multiple spouses because it's unsustainable. Even living with one person is hard. Trying to please multiple people is nearly impossible. Megan cried softly, then regained some composure. Tell Kelly I'm going home, but I'll fight the divorce. His baby needs a father, and that's the only reason I'll fight. She left with the Brooks, and soon they were out of sight. Shortly after, Missouri returned. Connie told him what Megan had said. He just nodded. Knowing deep down that she wouldn't go quietly, life moved forward. Kelly returned to Missouri for the divorce hearing. Lawrence filed the necessary motions and Meg accounted as she had promised. She admitted her mistakes but claimed she had ended her relationship with the Brooks and requested counseling. The judge took it under advisement and set another court date in 2 weeks. During the wait, Kelly stayed with his parents, who were both amazed by and pleased with the changes in him. Though disappointed in Megan's behavior, despite once loving her like a daughter, they now wanted nothing to do with her. During this time, Megan gave birth to a baby girl she named Kelly. DNA tests confirmed Kelly free as the father. Kelly's parents softened toward Megan to maintain a relationship with their granddaughter. Kelly visited the hospital before the baby was released, and though he felt a pull at his heart, he avoided Megan leaving whenever she arrived at his parents' home. At the next hearing, the judge ruled that counseling wouldn't help. He acknowledged Kelly's new life in Nebraska, and after reviewing the evidence, ruled that Megan would receive 50% of the assets with child support set for their daughter. However, no alimony was granted since Kelly earned less than Megan. The judge also set standard visitation, emphasizing that Megan must ensure Kelly has access to his daughter on holidays and weekends. Megan expressed her desire for Kelly to return, but the judge finalized the divorce. Kelly ensured the assets were evenly split to provide for his daughter and returned to Nebraska the next day. Upon returning, Kelly reconnected with old clients and started a one-man consulting business, using his horse Leroy to explore potential properties for companies. Between trips, he worked as a ranch hand and maintained his connection with his daughter through video calls, thanks to a cell phone booster installed at the ranch. Meanwhile, rumors about Missouri continued to circulate, drawing attention. Eventually, a cable network, interested in adapting Kelly's story into a movie, visited the Circle Bar X ranch. They agreed to fictionalize the story to protect his identity, and The Man from Missouri became the working title. Butch, with a degree in communications, was appointed liaison and a public relations team was assembled. Soon a corporation was formed and Missouri became CEO, with the ranch staff as shareholders. Megan then reached out to Kelly, expressing a desire to relocate and be closer to him and their daughter. She also asked about employment opportunities near the ranch. Kelly, surprised, but not displeased, saw potential in her request and offered her a role in helping with the movie deal. He promised to get back to her with more details. After speaking with Megan, Kelly called his parents to confirm the news. They brainstormed ideas, discarding some and expanding others until a solid plan emerged. Kelly then approached the Hyani Village Board with his proposal to build a couple of houses on the town's outskirts. While adding new homes might seem simple in a larger community, it was a significant decision for a small village with limited infrastructure. Fortunately, the village approved the plan and Megan began her move. Kelly found a small mobile home for Megan, and soon she and baby Kelly, nicknamed Miss Missouri in honor of her father, were settled in a movie writer, also arrived, expanding the project to include these developments. What started as one film, The Man from Missouri, grew into a series. The first part focused on the original story of cheating and healing, while the second covered the divorce and redemption. The writer even considered adding some of the legendary tales attributed to Missouri, with discussions about turning the story into a series. As for Missouri's love life, he and Megan remained friends and co-parents, but their romantic relationship was over. While high-end modular homes were being built for Megan and Kelly's parents, a new person entered the scene. Jane Gantry, one of the survivors from the helicopter crash, arrived at the ranch accompanied by Casey. The paramedic Jane, recovering from her injuries, thanked Missouri for saving her life. As their conversations deepened, Jane expressed her interest in opening a clinic in Hyani. Jane and Casey became integral to the community, with plans for the clinic taking shape. Meanwhile, Missouri juggled his ranch duties, parenting the movie project and site visits for clients. Jane, who had recovered enough to no longer need crutches, noticed that Missouri was overworking himself and convinced him to take a break during a week of riding and camping. Their relationship grew more physical engaged, and they became engaged. Megan realized that Missouri had moved on and began a relationship with Butch. Over time, Missouri and Jane had 2 sons, and Megan and Butch had 2 daughters. The families grew close, with Bill and Connie acting as grandparents to all the children. The movie, based on Kelly's life, was a success, with only a brief mention of his real name in the credits. It led to more films, including one focused on redemption and renewal. Kelly invested in the Circle Bar X Ranch, maintaining a strong relationship with Bill and Connie until they passed away. With arrangements in place for medical support through Jane's clinic, the Blazes never felt the need to leave their beloved home.